Well, so Tim, I just want to say it is an honour to meet you. You and Lloyd Webber are kind of the reason I became a musician. I went when I was 8 to Darlington to see a touring production of Evita. It's the first time I'd ever heard any live orchestra or theatre performer, and it left a big impact on me. I just wanted to ask, when you started out with Lloyd Webber, were you looking to do something different with musical theatre? Take it to a different area, or did it just evolve that way?
It definitely just evolved. We started out, the first musical we wrote, which never got performed, was called The Likes of Us, and it was very unoriginal.
Okay.
We were really very influenced by Oliver, by Richard Rodgers' shows, and we were frankly being rather unoriginal.
Right.
But when we changed tack, not really thinking we must do something different, but because we were asked to do something for a school, and we began writing Joseph, which was only intended for one school, we kind of stumbled onto a different style. And then the amalgamation, in particular with Superstar, of a rock band and a theatrical orchestra, I suppose we did stumble upon a totally new way of doing musicals.
Okay. And at the time, Jesus Christ and Evita, a subject about a political dictator and his wife, was that considered quite edgy for the time? I mean, you had protests at Jesus Christ, did you not?
Yes, I think Superstar was considered more edgy than Evita.
Really?
We had a lot of protests, but usually from people who hadn't actually seen the show. I think they were just concerned that Jesus was being mixed in with that evil rock and roll. But I think once people studied it or looked at it closely, they realized that it didn't say anything controversial at all. It was just the style of telling the story.
Right.
Although I suppose there was a certain originality for many people in the idea that the story was told from Judas's point of view.
Yes.
With Evita, we didn't really get many protests, mainly because people knew nothing about her.
No.
So they wouldn't know how to protest.
No.
You know, what are we moaning about?
And how did you stumble on Evita?
Well, I heard a radio program about Eva Peron in my car by chance.
Right.
And I was late for something, and if I'd been on time, I probably wouldn't have heard it. So the moral is always be late for things. But I knew a little bit about her, but not much. I knew she was Argentine, I knew she was glamorous, I knew she was dead, but I had really very little feeling for her story. But the more I investigated it, the more interesting I found it. Okay. And of course, in 1977, when we released the record, or late 76, hardly anybody in England knew who Eva Peron was.
No.
So even though she remained a big name huge name in Latin America, she was almost forgotten in Europe, or in many parts of Europe, certainly in Britain.
Okay.
And so we didn't get too many complaints because people were a bit baffled.
Right. And the social, political environment in this country in the 70s is obviously different to now. Do you think a musical that tackles a subject like a political dictator would work nowadays?
Well, I think anything can work in theory. We didn't do Evita because we were trying to make some political statement. It was just a great story.
Okay.
It happened that Evita became a hit just as Maggie Thatcher appeared. So a lot of political cartoonists and commentators were able to make a connection between the two, but it's not really as close a connection as they like to pretend. So I guess you could write a political musical today, but the public don't seem to like political musicals very much. I don't think they like being lectured to.
Okay.
But I think you can make points politically and socially in any story. And in the story of Eva Peron, which we did, the way we told the story, we made, or I tried to make a few points about, you know, systems of government or whatever, but I don't think anybody got any of them, frankly. They just like the tunes.
And you've said that yourself and Lloyd Webber wouldn't collaborate in the future together because you're not seen as relevant anymore. Do you think the musical theatre industry...
Well, that's not quite what I said. I did say that we're not cutting edge anymore, which I think is true. But then I'm not sure who is cutting edge these days. No one else.
No. Well, that was going to lead to another question.
But I don't think we'll write together again. We might. But I'm not sure there's any big idea that either of us have that would appeal to the other one. And we've got enough work on our hands together, looking after some of the old shows which keep going. And I've done a lot of other stuff since, and so has Andrew. So you never know, but I'd be surprised if we did another show now.
And do you think the musical theatre industry is crying out for a new, like, Rice-Lloyd Webber combination?
Well, no. I don't think, whatever the musical theatre industry is, I don't think they're going around saying, oh my goodness, we need some, we need something new. But actually, when I think about it, perhaps they do. I mean, the musical theatre scene at the moment is a little bit depressed.
Yes.
You still get hits, but they tend to be revivals of the old stuff, or jukebox musicals, some of which, like The Kinks' Sunny Afternoon, brilliant, great evening out, great songs, great show. But in terms of taking the musical theatre forward, if you want to do that, there's nothing happening.
Yes, so I was going to say, do you believe there is a lack of new original story material? Because new musicals like Wicked, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda are relying on stories already known, as it were.
Yes, I think nearly all musicals have done that. They've always relied on something that people can identify with. I mean, Superstar and Evita were not based on books or films, other than the Bible, and the history of Argentina. I mean, obviously the point I'm making is that they weren't specifically adaptations of something that had already been a play or a film. But it's difficult to do a totally original musical. There are very, very few which are completely original.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried it with Chess, and that was pretty successful in some respects. And I still think the original version, the definitive version of Chess, I still think has to be performed. But that was quite a sort of bold attempt to tell a completely new story through musicals, and it's hardly ever done.
Okay.
It's very difficult. I can see why it's hardly ever done, because people don't get it. It's something. I mean, if they go to The Lion King, or if they go to even Bend It Like Beckham or whatever, they've got a clue what it's going to be about.
Yeah.
And that's half the battle.
Okay. You said when it comes to a show, you get the story right, then the music, and then you do the lyrics. You've got to get the story right for any show. And then it doesn't really matter, I guess, whether the music comes next or the lyrics, or whether they both come together. But the story is the key. You've got to have a good structure of the story. And a Disney film, like The Lion King, you did the lyrics first and then Elton.
Yes, well, Elton
music.
John is an exception to the general rule that most songwriters or most composers would rather do the tune first.
Yeah.
He is an exception in that he only writes music when he's got a lyric. Right. So all his great songs, with Bernie Taupin and others, the words came first, which is, sometimes I think that's extraordinary.
I know. And do you yourself find it easier to have the melody there? Does that influence like the tone of words you might use?
Melody definitely influences the words if you get that first. But it was interesting for me when I worked with Elton on The Lion King and a show we did in America called Aida and one or two other things with him. It was different. I enjoyed sitting down writing with a blank piece of paper and no tune to play over and over again. The only danger is if you're writing words without a tune is you get a bit long-winded. And because if you have a tune, you've got to say something in 9 syllables.
Right.
So you've only got 9 notes to make a point. On the other hand, you've got the freedom, and you can change around, you can muck around with the rhyming structure if you don't have a tune. But there are pluses and minuses both ways, and I really enjoyed working the other way round with Elton.
Okay. And a personal question, as I took time out of my London study to go and study in Paris, which I see did, to the Sorbonne.
Yes.
What did you study there?
I'm glad you asked me that question. It was a thing called the Cours de Civilisation Française, which was a kind of general studies of 5 or 6 topics for students who had a glimmering of French, and it was for foreign students mainly.
Right. Okay.
And it was just a 6-month, 9-month thing where we did various topics. We were taught in French, and we did French history, French literature. I mean, it was, to be honest, I didn't work very hard, but I did get a certificate at the end.
Oh, great.
Yes.
And finally, you're a native of Buckinghamshire, but
Yes.
support Sunderland.
Yes.
Can you tell me how that came about?
I thought everybody supported Sunderland.
Not in Newcastle and Gateshead.
Oh, right, sorry. No, it's stupid, really. I was about 8 or 7, and at school, everybody supported a team.
Okay.
A lot of people supported Luton or Watford because they were local, or even some of the North London clubs, Arsenal, Tottenham, or even Wolves, who were the champs at the time.
Okay.
But I wanted a team nobody else had, and I liked the name. I saw the name, I looked down the list of teams in the league, and about number 4 or 5, so it's a long time ago, in the first division was Sunderland. I thought that's a nice name. Conjures up visions of tropical beaches and palm trees. So I thought I'll support Sunderland. And by the time I found out that Sunderland were the furthest away team in the first division from where I lived, it was too late to change. I was already, in the playground saying, Sunderland are the champ, And so I did follow them. And I mean, living in Buckinghamshire, it wasn't as if I was I was very, very young. It wasn't as if I was in a place where there was a football culture, and there was no big or interesting local team. It was Barnet, who weren't that far away, but Barnet weren't even in the league then.
Okay.
And by the time I heard about the Barnet football team, I was already a Sunderland man.
Okay. Wow. Well,
But it's great because it gives me an excuse to come up here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to your concert, and thank you so much for your time.
Hearing your oboe.
Oh, thank you. I'll do my best.
We'll give you a solo.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.